Well, hello there. So I hear you'd like to learn how to make some frog bread. For this recipe, you're going to need 6 cups of unbleached or all-purpose flour, 2 cups of lukewarm milk, about a half a cup of water, 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of yeast, and a quarter cup of sugar. You'll also need a mixing bowl and possibly a spoon. But for me, I'll be using my stand mixer today. If you are using a stand mixer, you're going to want to go ahead and fit it with your dough hook attachment and just place your mixing bowl inside. Next, you're going to want to add your yeast to your warm milk, and you're just going to want to stir that up a little bit just so it's incorporated. And you're going to let that sit for probably about 10 minutes with a wrap on top, either a beeswax wrap or plastic wrap or some kind of cover is fine. It doesn't matter too much. Next, you're going to add in your 6 cups of flour all at once. Just dump it in the bowl, it's fine. And once you have your flour in there, you're going to add the rest of your dry ingredients, which includes your sugar and salt. Be sure to spill that absolutely everywhere. And then you're just going to take your little tiny whisk and give this whole thing a nice good whisk just to get everything combined before you add in the wet ingredients. Now take your yeast mixture that has been sitting for about 10 minutes. It should have foamed up nice. If it hasn't, it might be dead and you may need some new yeast. And you're just going to stir that up before you pour it into the dry mixture. You could add this slowly if you're scared of it clumping, but if you're using a stand mixer, you should be absolutely fine to just dump it all in at once. And you're going to set your stand mixer down and let this mix at a low speed. It should take about 10 minutes to come together. Might take a little longer, might take a little less, but you know what dough looks like, so you'll know when it's ready. I had the guard set up, which you should absolutely do, but then I realized you couldn't really see what was going on, so I took it off, and you can see the repercussions of that, so please use your guard so you don't make a mess like I did. Clean off your screen because you're still making a mess. Once the dough has been beating for a little while and it starts to get a little shaggy, you can start adding in small amounts of your water. You probably won't need the whole half cup. I think I only used a quarter cup. But if you need more or less, that's fine. You just want a nice smooth dough at the end. Once you've got a nice, smooth, soft dough, you can stop kneading or turn your mixer off, depending on your method of doing this. And you're going to want to take your dough and just sort of form it into a nice little tight ball. So I kind of like wrap it up underneath itself and then rub it on the table in a circular motion, just kind of tucking my fingers underneath until you get a nice tight little ball. Now you're going to oil your bowl a little bit, or a different bowl if you have too much dough in the other one. And just drop your little dough baby in there. Give it a nice little spin so it gets nice and covered in the oil. That way it doesn't stick to the bowl or the cloth or whatever you put on top. And I'm just going to use some plastic wrap. I know it's terrible, but I find my dough always dries out if I don't use plastic wrap, even with my beeswax wraps. If anybody knows a better method, please let me know. But you could just use a damp dish towel. The goal here is just so that your dough doesn't dry out while it's rising. And you're going to set your dough to rise for about an hour and a half until it's doubled in size. This could be faster or slower, depending on how hot it is where you are. And you're going to give it a few nice little taps just to degas the dough a little bit. Now you're going to cut your dough into 2 large pieces to start. This is where the artistic side of this recipe comes into play. I am not much of an artist, so this is where it all goes wrong, honestly, but this is how I did it. So I took this first half and I rolled it into a ball just like before, and then I kind of shaped it into like an elongated teardrop shape, kind of like a frog body shape, I guess, but this will be the big part of the frog's body. So I just kind of tap it and press it around, and this is where you can really have fun with it, especially if you have kids. This is probably like the most fun part of this whole recipe. And try not to cut your thumb off when you do this, but I'm going to take the other half of the dough and cut that in half. And once again, I'm going to roll this into a little bit of a tight ball, just kind of working it with my fingers and pushing the dough underneath itself. And you're going to slice that ball in half, and this is going to make the hind legs, kind of like the thighs, I guess, of the frog. And you're just going to want to kind of squeeze all of that together just so the dough sticks to itself so that it doesn't fully come apart. And I'm going to take the rest of my dough and I'm going to cut this into thirds. And again, just rolling this into a tight little ball. This is kind of how you do this whole recipe. And cutting this dough ball once again in half, kind of longer ways, because this is going to be the foot of the frog. So this is their hind feet. And this may take a little bit of time to get the right size, but if it's too big, just cut a little off. If it's too small, add a little on, it's fine. And then I just kind of cut little triangles in as like the toes. So I just did 3 toes. I don't know how many toes a frog has, but it's fine. You can just sort of pinch it around to smooth the dough out and make them look a little bit better, a little bit more pointed or rounded, depending on what you want. And same thing again, I'm just kind of squeezing everything together so that the dough stays together nicely when it bakes. And you're just going to want to do the exact same thing with the other foot. You're also going to be doing the exact same thing for the front legs. You don't need the thigh part for the front legs, you just need their little feet. Just make 2 more of the same size thing, but just a little bit smaller. So I just cut one of those thirds in half. And have a moment for existential crisis. And wonder what choices got you here, making frog feet out of dough. For the front feet, I'm kind of tucking them up underneath the dough so that they kind of stick out the bottom and the dough can rest on top of it, kind of pressing it together. And here I am again, just kind of squeezing everything together. So now you're gonna make the eyes. This is pretty self-explanatory. You're just gonna want 2 little dough balls. And I did this several times before I decided on a size, and the size is still very wrong. But you can just look at pictures online. Some people have done this way better than me. But I just did 2 little eyes, and then I actually added 2 little smaller balls on top of the eyes, which made it really scary. And then you can kind of go free with this. I decided to cut him a little creepy nose, and then I totally forgot what frogs look like, and cut him this weird little mouth. So now he looks like Voldemort.
Harry Potter.
And then you're just going to want to let your dough rest for probably another half an hour to an hour so that it can rise a little more and all the pieces can stick together. And in that meantime, I also took all the leftover pieces of dough and made a tiny, cuter frog.
Look at this dude.
Once you've decided that your dough is risen enough and is nice and puffy, you're going to want to take 1 full egg, which I just realized I didn't say in the ingredients earlier, but you do need an egg, and you're going to want to whisk that up. And you want to give it a really nice whisking so there's no like streaks of white in it, and you can add a splash of water or milk if you want to, but this is really just so that the bread can get that nice brown top. It's not necessarily a requirement, but I think it makes the bread way better when it's nice and like crackly and shiny on top. Oops. I also decided to add a little bit of flaky salt and rosemary to the top of this bread. You can honestly use any flavoring you want. You could even add rosemary or garlic to the dough itself so it's baked into the bread. That would be really good. But this is just like the very basic recipe. You can really do absolutely anything you want with this. You could even add like chocolate chips or blueberries or whatever. Next, you're going to set your oven to preheat at 350 degrees. And once it's up to temp, you can just slip in your little dough babies and let them bake for about 30 minutes or so. You're going to want to check on these because the smaller one will cook faster than the bigger one. But basically when they're nice and brown on top, and if you tap it, it sounds hollow, it's cooked on the inside. Now you can just go ahead and slice up your little baby. Hopefully it's nice and cooked all the way through. You need nice little air pockets. Mine turned out really nice and fluffy, so as long as you just knead it together properly, this should come out really nice. Yeah, I mean, it tastes like bread.
He's good though.
I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm still a little new to this whole thing. I know my voiceover is a little funny and my editing is a little bad, but hopefully I'll get better. And I just want to say thanks for the support. And if you guys have any suggestions for anything else you want me to make or anything you want to learn, you can just tweet it at me is probably the best way, or comment down below, and I'll probably get to everything you guys suggest because there's not a lot of you who are watching these yet, but if somehow a ton of people start watching it, I'm going to be in trouble. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye!